Imagine the most ordinary object you can find in your pocket. It's a greenish sheet of paper imbued with cotton and linen, passing through millions of hands, witnessing countless transactions, hopes, and disappointments. But if you stop this endless cycle and bring the banknote closer to your eyes, the familiar financial instrument suddenly transforms into an ancient manuscript. On the reverse side of a $1 bill, a whole universe of symbols unfolds, stirring the minds of conspiracy theorists, historians, and seekers of hidden meanings for decades. To the left, a truncated pyramid above which hovers a radiant eye. To the right, a bald eagle, clutching contradictory attributes of war and peace in its talons. Latin maxims encircling these images sound like incantations or prophecies. Many are convinced that a map to world domination, left by a secret brotherhood of Freemasons, is encrypted here. But the true story of the appearance of these signs is much more complex, dramatic, and fascinating than any fabricated myth. This is a story not just about money, but about the birth of a nation that tried to encode its destiny in a single image. To understand the essence of this visual cipher, we need to go back in time to the moment when the United States of America existed only as a fragile idea, written in ink on parchment. On the 4th of July, 1776, the Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence. The hall was filled with an atmosphere of triumph mixed with anxiety about an uncertain future. But the Founding Fathers understood that declaring independence was only half the battle. The new country needed an official sign of sovereignty, a seal that would confirm the legitimacy of documents and place the young state alongside the great powers of Europe. On that very day, even before the ink on the signatures had dried, the first committee for the design of the Great Seal was established. It included three titans of American history: Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams. It would seem that these brilliant minds should have coped with the task in a couple of hours. However, the process dragged on for a full 6 years. It is here that the first layer of conflict begins: the clash of ideas about what the new republic should look like. This was not a simple choice of logo. It was a struggle for the visual identity of an entire era. Franklin, Jefferson, and Adams, despite their genius, were not artists. They turned for help to a man named Pierre-Eugène du Cimetière, a talented portrait painter and collector from Switzerland. The proposals they put forward might surprise a modern person. Franklin, being a pragmatic man but prone to allegories, suggested a scene from biblical history: sea waves engulfing Pharaoh's chariots and Moses stretching out his hand over the water. The motto read, "Rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God." Jefferson envisioned a different picture: the children of Israel in the desert, led by a cloud pillar by day and a pillar of fire by night. Adams, leaning towards classicism, proposed depicting Hercules choosing between virtue and vice. Please note, none of these initial designs included a pyramid or an all-seeing eye in a triangle. This debunks the popular myth that Masonic symbols were incorporated into the design from day one as part of a unified, secret plan. In fact, the process was chaotic, full of disputes and creative dead ends. The first committee could not reach a consensus, and their design was rejected by Congress. A second attempt was made in 1780, but it also failed. Only the third committee, convened in May 1782, was able to get things moving. Young lawyer and artist William Barton entered the scene, and Congress Secretary Charles Thompson put the final touch. It was Thompson, a man of profound erudition and, importantly, not a member of a Masonic lodge, who gathered the best ideas of the previous committees and synthesized them into the image we know today. However, the question of Masonic influence remains open and requires careful analysis. It cannot be denied that many founding fathers, including Benjamin Franklin and George Washington, were active members of the fraternity of Freemasons. Freemasonry in the 18th century was not so much a sinister sect as a club of intellectuals where ideas of the Enlightenment, liberty, equality, and fraternity were discussed. The symbolic language of that era was universal. Images that are today unequivocally attributed to Masons were then common cultural property. The all-seeing eye, or Eye of Providence, was found in Christian art of the Renaissance long before the first Masonic lodges appeared. It symbolized divine observation and protection, the idea that higher powers watch over human affairs. For a young nation that challenged the most powerful empire in the world, belief in divine patronage was not just a religious feeling, but a political necessity. The pyramid, the second key element, also has a double bottom. For Masons, it could indeed symbolize the building of a temple of wisdom. But in the context of state creation, Charles Thompson imbued it with a different meaning. The pyramid is a symbol of strength and durability. Unlike European monarchies, which collapsed and were redrawn, America was to stand forever, like the Egyptian monuments. But look closely at the image. The pyramid is unfinished. Its apex is truncated, creating a flat platform. This is a brilliant metaphor. The United States is an unfinished project. The construction of an ideal society is a process that has no end. Each new generation must add its stone to this masonry. This is a message to descendants. The work is not finished. It is ongoing right now, and you are its participants. At the base of the pyramid, one can discern the Roman numerals MDCLXXVI. If we translate them into the Arabic numeral system, we get the year 1776. This is the birth date of the state, the foundation upon which the entire structure rests. But the most interesting thing lies in the combination of the pyramid and the eye floating above it in a triangle, surrounded by radiance. The eye is not the completion of the pyramid in a physical sense. It hovers above it, like a divine sanction for the completion of a great work. The motto, Annuit Coeptis, located above the eye, translates from Latin as, "He has approved our undertakings." Who is He? The text does not name God, which allows every citizen, be it a Christian, a deist, or a freethinker, to imbue it with their own meaning. For the Founding Fathers, this was a statement of fact. The successful outcome of the Revolution and the creation of the Constitution was a miracle that could not have happened without divine intervention. Under the pyramid, a ribbon is unfurled, with perhaps the most famous and debated phrase, Novus Ordo Seclorum. Conspiracy theorists often translate this as New World Order, seeing in it direct proof of a global conspiracy. However, any classical philologist would tell you that such a translation is inaccurate and taken out of context. The phrase is a reference to the poetry of Virgil, a Roman poet who foretold the coming of a golden age. A more accurate translation reads as New Order of the Ages, or New Era of History. The founders of the USA did not plan to conquer the world. They proclaimed that with the creation of America, a new historical epoch began, where power does not come from a king by right of birth, but from the people based on a social contract. This was a break with the old order of Europe, with its feudalism and dynastic wars. It was a bold claim that the history of mankind would henceforth take a different path. Let's now turn to the right side of the banknote, to the obverse of the Great Seal, where the bald eagle reigns. The choice of this bird also did not pass without debate. Franklin, known for his wit, expressed doubt about the eagle in private correspondence, calling it a bird with bad moral qualities that does not disdain carrion and often steals prey from others. He half-jokingly suggested making the turkey the symbol, a bird, in his opinion, much more respectable and truly American. But the eagle won as a symbol of strength, keen sight, and sovereignty. The bird holds in its talons objects that create a powerful visual balance. In its right claw is an olive branch, an eternal symbol of peace. In its left is a bundle of arrows, a sign of readiness for war. Here lies an important detail that is often overlooked. The eagle's head is turned towards the olive branch. This is not an accident, but a declaration of state policy. The United States always prefers peace, but is always ready for defense. This is a visual embodiment of the ancient principle, if you want peace, prepare for war, but with a clear emphasis on the priority of diplomacy. Above the eagle's head shines a constellation. But this is not a real astronomical map. 13 stars, grouped in the shape of a six-pointed star, break through the clouds. The number 13 permeates the entire design of the banknote, becoming an obsessive rhythm of the composition. 13 steps of the pyramid, 13 letters in the motto, quote 5, 13 stripes on the shield covering the eagle's chest, 13 leaves on the olive branch, 13 olives, 13 arrows in the bundle, 13 stars above the head. For lovers of mysticism, this is a clear sign of occult influence. 13 is considered a number of transformation, death, and rebirth. However, historical reality is much more prosaic, but no less majestic for it. 13 is the number of the first colonies that united into the Union. The repetition of this number serves as a constant reminder of the Federation's origin. It is a mantra of unity. Quote 6, quote 7, reads the ribbon in the eagle's beak. This motto describes the very essence of the American experiment: how to create a monolithic nation from disparate parts, different cultures, and interests. The shield on the eagle's chest deserves special attention. It has no support. The eagle holds it itself. This symbolizes that the United States must rely only on its own virtue and strength, not hoping for external alliances or dynastic marriages, as was customary in Europe. The colors of the shield, red, white, and blue, repeat the flag, but here the white stripes symbolize purity and innocence, the red ones, valor and endurance, and the blue color of the upper part signifies vigilance, perseverance, and justice. This is a color code of the moral qualities necessary for a citizen. But how did these symbols, developed at the end of the 18th century, end up on the most common banknote of modern times? Here, the plot takes a sharp turn, transporting us to the 20th century, to the times of the Great Depression. For almost a century and a half, the Great Seal was used only for state documents. Ordinary Americans rarely saw its full version. The situation changed in 1935. The country was in the deepest economic crisis. Hope was fading with each passing day. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt was looking for any way to lift the nation's spirits. And here, Henry Wallace, Secretary of Agriculture and future Vice President, enters the scene. Wallace was an extraordinary figure. Unlike the pragmatists of his time, he was deeply interested in esotericism, theosophy, and symbolism. It was he who, upon seeing the image of the Great Seal, was struck by the power of the motto, quote, 0. He interpreted this as a premonition of the, quote, 1, Roosevelt's policy designed to pull the country out of the crisis. Wallace came to the president with a proposal to place these symbols on a new $1 coin. Roosevelt, possessing keen political acumen, approved the idea but decided it would be better to place them on a paper bill, as it had much wider circulation and a larger area for detailed rendering. The moment of truth came when Roosevelt personally made corrections to the design. Initially, the pyramid was supposed to be on the right and the eagle on the left. The president switched their positions. He wanted the first thing a European person, reading from left to right, would see to be the pyramid, a symbol of material power and construction, and only then the eagle as a symbol of spirit and freedom. Moreover, Roosevelt insisted that the phrase, "the Great Seal," be added below the circles, giving the money the status of an official state manifesto. Thus, in the midst of an economic catastrophe, when faith in capitalism had wavered, Americans were handed a symbol reminding them that their country was a project approved by heaven, and that difficulties were temporary, while the foundation was eternal. The irony of fate is that it was Roosevelt and Wallace's decision, intended to inspire the nation, that spawned a wave of conspiracy theories that continues to this day. In the 1930s, the world was on the brink of a major war, and talk of a, quote, "3" sounded ambiguous. People prone to seeing hidden springs of history began to interpret the truncated pyramid as a symbol of a hierarchical society, where the elite, at the top, in the _quote_4_, control the ignorant masses that form the base. The separation of the eye from the pyramid began to be interpreted as the alienation of power from the people. Latin phrases turned into proof of a global plan to reorganize the world in the interests of a narrow group of bankers and oligarchs. But let's look deeper into the philosophical conflict embedded in this design. It is a clash between enlightenment and mystery. The Founding Fathers were children of the Age of Reason. They believed in transparency, logic, and education. They created symbols to enlighten citizens, to remind them of high ideals. However, the nature of a symbol is such that it always contains an unspoken element. Where reason sees an allegory of virtue, fear sees a sign of threat. Masonic parallels certainly exist, but they are explained not by conspiracy, but by the common cultural vocabulary of the time. Both Masons and the founders of the state drew inspiration from the same sources: ancient philosophy, biblical texts, and Renaissance humanism. Using a compass or a pyramid then was as natural as using a cloud icon today to denote data storage. It was the language of the era, understood by the educated class. It's interesting to trace how the perception of these symbols has changed over time. In the 19th century, the emphasis was on the eagle and its military might. During the Cold War, attention shifted to the phrase, quote, "0", which incidentally appeared on money much later than its printing, in the mid-50s of the 20th century, as a counterweight to the state atheism of the Soviet Union. And in the era of the internet and globalization, all eyes turned to the pyramid and the eye. We live in a time when information has become the main currency, and surveillance is the main phobia. Therefore, the all-seeing eye today is perceived not as the loving gaze of God, but as a surveillance camera lens, as a symbol of the total control of special services and corporations. The ancient symbol has been recoded by modern fears. However, if we discard fears and look at the banknote impartially, we will see in it an amazing lesson. Relevant even today. The truncated pyramid tells us that any state building is a process that requires time and patience. An ideal society cannot be built in one day. The foundation must be broad and strong, and each layer must rest on the previous one. This is a lesson in continuity and stability. The bundle of arrows teaches that strength is in unity. Individually, an arrow is easy to break. Together, they are indestructible. In a world that is becoming increasingly fragmented and polarized, the reminder of the strength of union resonates particularly strongly. The olive branch and the eagle's head turn are a lesson in priorities. Power must serve peace, not aggression. This is a reminder that the ultimate goal of any struggle is harmony and prosperity. And the eye in the triangle, however we interpret it, as God, conscience, or history, reminds us of responsibility. No one acts in a vacuum. Every action has a witness, and every decision has consequences that extend beyond our lives. This is a call to the ethical dimension of politics and economics. Money is not an end in itself. It is merely a means to achieve that new order of the ages, where law and freedom reign. Thus, a simple banknote transforms into a complex historical document. It bears the fingerprints of Franklin and Jefferson, the ambitions of Roosevelt, and the dreams of Wallace. In it are frozen the hopes of the 18th century and the fears of the 20th century. It combines pagan antiquity and Protestant ethics, imperial scope and republican modesty. It is a paradox printed on paper. The most material thing in the world is thoroughly permeated with spiritual symbolism. Concluding our investigation, let's return to where we started. Take the banknote in your hands once more. Feel its texture. Now you look at it with different eyes. You see not just a means of payment, but a message sent across centuries. Those who created this design did not know what the world would be like in 250 years. They could not foresee the internet, nuclear energy, or artificial intelligence. But they embedded in this small rectangle of paper principles they considered eternal. And perhaps the main secret of the Masonic signs on the dollar is not that they conceal secret power, but that they openly offer us to take responsibility for completing that very pyramid. For it is still unfinished. The apex still awaits its stone. And what this new order will be in the future depends not on secret societies, but on those who hold this dollar in their hands right now. This is the genius of the design, to create a design that makes one reflect on the eternal at the moment of the most mundane transaction. And as long as these symbols provoke disputes, interest, and the desire to unravel their mystery, they continue to work, keeping the attention of millions of people on fundamental questions of being, power, and human destiny. History continues, and every time you pay for coffee or travel, you, without knowing it, touch the greatest dream of building an ideal world, encrypted in green engraving.